Hey, what up, YouTube? I know y'all are used to my little videos I make and whatnot. Typically, I guess when it's been pertaining to sports and all the conference realignment stuff, it's usually just me in front of my iPhone. Um, but this is something that you need a visual aid, right? I can say this stuff out loud, but visually looking at it, it'll make it make more sense. This is just something for fun, speculation. Everybody throws their thing out there. Oh, make this conference, make that conference. Um, if you don't realize by now, I am very much pro NIU. I'm pro NIU being in the best situation possible. Um, in today's world, that's more of a financial thing than it is a geographical thing. Um, like I said, love the MAC, but it's like financially, I'll say this for all the schools in all honesty, financially, the conference has not been benefiting the athletics programs. Um, like I said, we have Maction, which literally was birthed from NIU and football. I mean, NIU and Toledo football games. Like you literally had just straight shootout football games, both teams scoring 60 plus points, and then the final score coming in, with under a minute left in the game, if I remember correctly, and it was like this for a few years. It wasn't just some one-off game. You just had multiple matchups between these teams, and they were just putting up points. Like those NIU and Toledo games were always you knew some fireworks were going to pop off. Of course, you had other MAC games where you get incredible plays, you get high scoring games, you just get these different things. But it's like those NIU and Toledo games we're talking about. Let's go back to like 2010 on up, and I want to say even before that. I mean, you had some NIU and Toledo games back where you had Garrett Wolf taking off on Toledo. Like you just had these high-powered offenses. Defenses clearly were not the center point or the focus of these teams. At least not in those games. I'm not saying defense didn't exist, but typically, the team with the better defense would eventually or essentially win out. And you definitely would see that in the conference championship game, where typically the team with the better defense, if you can slow down that other offense, you're probably going to win the conference. Um, but yeah, like, we got Maction and the Mac as a brand or Maction as a brand, and, those weekday games that would come on ESPN, ESPN2, whatever channel, and people would watch. Like, today you are seeing the aftermath, or not aftermath, but you're actually seeing the impact that it's had, right? Because you have people all over social media, people all over the place. When it was heard that the Mountain West was trying to recruit NIU and Toledo, right? They're trying to, right? You literally had articles being written all over the place. How dare the Mountain West do that? Why would don't do that? You're messing with football. You're messing with America. And it's like, yo, it's hilarious from that standpoint, but you have to view the positives and the negative. The positives is essentially you have people out there who view the MAC literally they watch those weekday games. Like they view the MAC and they understand that this is a conference that has been pretty solid, pretty consistent, that's been together for the last 20 something years. So, they're entertaining to watch on a weekday. You might just have the game on in the background, killing time, whatever it is. But they've come to know and learn about this particular conference and those matchups in those weekday games. So, over time, I feel great and I like that, on a national level, I guess you can say there's folks who watch these games, great. But people don't know and understand that financially, the only ones who've been benefiting from any of this has been ESPN. It's been ESPN. Nobody else, the schools themselves, are not really benefiting from the deal that they're in. I want to say Conference USA and the MAC have just about the same deal. With Conference USA's deal essentially kind of being weaker, But the Conference USA has lost schools. They've rebuilt essentially using FCS schools that are, that have come up to the FBS level. So it kind of makes sense that their deal would not be as good as the Max. And when I say good, I mean that very lightly. But then you have the Sun Belt that does have a better payout than the MAC. Um, and the Sun Belt is also a conference that they've brought in FCS schools that moved up. And it's like, how? How does the Sun Belt get more? And they haven't even necessarily truly had the same longevity as the Mac in a sense, right? And it's like, how did the Sun Belt walk into a better deal? Like, I need a breakdown on that one, right? So it just feels like you get kind of snubbed. But at the end of the day, these are grown adult people. People went, they were at a table, they were sitting at a table, and clearly things were being negotiated, conversation was happening, and folks walked away thinking this deal for the Mac works. We'll take it. We'll sign on the line, and yeah, our media rights basically belong to ESPN, or they've belonged to ESPN for like the last 20 something years. And I'm like, I want to say this year more than ever before, I'm truly noticing. I'm like, yo, we're getting nothing. We're getting no playtime, barely at all on, like we're everything's on ESPN Plus. Everything's on ESPN Plus, and it sucks. It sucks. So yeah, there's people who like, how dare you try to break up the MAC? How dare you try to ruin this? Da 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 da. But I'm like, yo, schools like NIU, schools like Toledo, schools like Miami, Ohio, Bowling Green, just all the school, yo, these conferences and these schools need money to survive and to grow. It would be great if they could grow as a conference together, but that would have required a better payout, right? If the MAC was getting a 4 mil per school or 5 mil per school payout, let's stay put, let's stick where we are and keep growing, building, growing and building. They are not getting that type of money. I want to say, right, because I don't officially know, so let me quit speaking as if I know exactly the exact number, but this stuff is reported, it is out there. It's estimated, right, let's use the correct words, it's estimated that the MAC schools get a payout of, purely just for the media rights deal, we're not talking about anything else, they get a payout of about $800,000 a year. In comparison with a lot of other conferences, like I said, Conference USA is the only other conference that's probably making less than the MAC. Sunbelt is making more, Mountain West is making more, AAC, every other conference is making significantly more when you think about it. I want to say the Sunbelt payout is 2 million per school per year, and the Sunbelt has more schools. So maybe, just maybe when that deal was struck, maybe they had a few less schools, so maybe that number might be a little bit different. But I'm fairly certain that the Sunbelt deal, based on the last time I checked, it was 2 million per school per year. 2 million per school per year. I might have to go back and look at when that deal was struck versus how many schools they had in the conference at that point in time, because you'll have to shift the numbers around a bit. But if that's what the numbers are, and that is the correct updated number, even with the number of schools they have, like, come on. Come on. So you have to understand. You have to understand. NIU has been competitive far before they played Notre Dame. NIU has been a competitive program for what, 2, 3 decades now? Been very competitive. They're one of the few group of five schools that at one point you literally had Boise State. Like, that's like your unanimous number one group of school, right? When it comes to football, when it comes to wins and all that stuff. Boise State is the top. Boise State should have been in the power conference years ago. It was Boise State, and then right under Boise State was basically NIU. Like at one point, if you went and watched a NIU game, let's say it's 2015, 2016, something like that, they're showing different little stats, little different pieces of data, right? They're showing most winningest non-power conference teams in the country, and literally you have Boise State, you got NIU, you had a few others, but I'm like, NIU was very solid and very legit. Like they should have moved or made a move or did something when, right? Chances and opportunities, I get it. Like I said, who knows what was actually truly going on? Who knows how many different times NIU may have actually tried to get out of the MAC, tried to go elsewhere. We don't know what AD Frazier has been doing over the years necessarily, right? A lot of things don't make it out to the public. So for all I know, he has been advocating to try to get NIU into the American Athletic Conference. I want to say he definitely more publicly advocated to try to get NIU into the Big 12 years ago. Like that's almost like 8 years ago, just about, right? So that was more of a public thing, right? He was trying to make that happen. Everybody in this situation clearly understands, and hopefully they understand it's a money thing, right? We see what's going on with the mega conferences, the big two, which is the Big Ten and the SEC, right? All that's money. If you don't understand how and why schools like USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington ended up in the Big Ten, it is money and nothing else. It's money. We need to make something happen. And if you've been following my videos, watching my videos, you will notice, or you've heard me say, I truly believe the PAC is gonna make something happen. As of right now, you're looking at this map. I put this together this morning. Um, Everything essentially to the left half of the United States of America, those are all the current schools that essentially will be Pacific Athletic Conference members, right? Boise State, Utah State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State. For the most part, this is basically their last season in the Mountain West. Gonzaga has joined the PAC, but Gonzaga doesn't have a football team. And then, of course, there's Oregon State and Washington State, the two members that were left after basically everybody else ran for the hills. So here's the current PAC. Right now, the Pacific Athletic Conference has been all quiet on the Western Front, right? Like nothing's been coming out, right? You're not hearing really much about any sort of expansion talks. You're not hearing about, oh, they've contacted this school, contacted that school. Like once they added Gonzaga, things kind of went radio quiet. And what was put out there was, okay, well now the PAC is uh, going through a media rights eval. They're trying to get things in order before they make their next moves, and that seems like that's what's going on, right? Like I said, this is just me going based off what I've heard. None of that may be factual at all. They could be completely doing something else, and we just think that, oh well, they're ramping up media rights eval, next steps, yada yada yada. The PAC and the Mountain West were basically in the same situation, where their main key goal was eighth full member, and PAC got their eighth full member. The Mountain West has their eighth full member. They were able to get Hawaii, which was a football only member. They were able to get Hawaii to move the rest of its sports over to the Mountain West as well. So now they have those eight full members. And then once the Mountain West had those eight full members, people heard right away, instantly, the next steps for the Mountain West is reach out to NIU and Toledo. So apparently, supposedly, that's happening right now. But like I said, unless you're there, unless you're the athletic director or the assistant athletic director or somebody who is in those rooms, in those offices, who knows what's truly going on, right? That's it, right? We don't know what exactly is being communicated between the Mountain West and NIU, the Mountain West and Toledo, the Mountain West and any other schools. We don't really know. We don't really know. We know that the Mountain West has gauged, they went to gauge interest from Sam Houston. That was a school that I had pretty high up on my list, that if the Mountain West could add Sam Houston, that'd be a nice pickup for that conference. Just as of the last 24 hours or so, Something came out, Sam Houston, no interest in joining the Mountain West, yada, yada, yada. People on social media are taking that and running with it. Oh, the Mountain West can't do nothing right, yada, yada. Like, the Mountain West didn't offer Sam Houston a spot. They were just gauging interest. They just probably just wanted to put some feelers out and see if there was any interest at all. And I'm pretty sure that's all that happened. Um, but me, like I said, I have no true loyalty to anybody other than NIU. I want to see my alma mater in the best position possible, and a lot of that is primarily financially, right? I want to see some good football, some great football, but the financial aspect of things, to me, that's number one on my list, and I'm pretty sure that's the same for AD Frazier. I'm pretty sure that's exactly how he's looking at things, right? We have to keep in mind with Mountain West, it was a football only offer. And if it's a football only offer, unless they're saying football only, but we will still pay you out a full percentage, that's one thing. But more than likely, it's safe to assume that, well, we're inviting you for football only, and maybe you're only getting a 75% cut, right? Since it's football only. Well, NIU's in a situation where they can only really do football only. If you look at this current map, even though these are the Pacific Athletic Conference schools, the Mountain West essentially is set up the same way. NIU, if we look at where Colorado State is, just imagine that that's Air Force, right? Just imagine that that's Air Force. NIU would have to travel all the way over there to play a school like Air Force. If we look at the state of Texas, if you look at the bottom left corner tip part, that's actually in the Mountain Time Zone, that's UTEP, right? New Mexico, that's in New Mexico, right? The distance that NIU would have to travel to play schools like UNLV, UN Reno, to play a Hawaii, to play San Jose State, right? To play Wyoming. The distance, what you're looking at on this current map, it ain't that different from what the PAC would be. Really no different from what the PAC would be if NIU joined. Football works. For those who don't understand, joining for football works. You only would have to worry about 4 away conference games. 4 away conference games. You would have to charter those flights. We know things can get pricey, they can get expensive. But if you're now making a few $1,000,000, it could be doable or it should be doable. Right? We can't do all sports because, well, now you're talking about more than just 4. You're talking about potentially, we're talking about a whole basketball season. So we're talking about 30 plus games. And we're assuming that half of those games would be away, half of them at home. Some of them somewhere in the mix are tournaments, so you're probably at some neutral site location, right? That's where things get complicated. Then we're also talking about, baseball. We're talking about softball, women's basketball season, right? All of these things, right? It gets real difficult once it becomes 4 away games, once that turns into way more than just 4 away games, right? That's the thing with NIU to the Mountain West. That's why it kind of has to be a football only offer. At least at the moment, it would have to be a football only offer. The PAC, on the other hand, the PAC has shown their hand and they've shown who they want and what they're willing to go after. The PAC has reached out to Memphis. We know that happened. The PAC reached out to Connecticut. We know that happened. So that shows that the PAC clearly has no issue going East Coast. Now, Memphis is Central Time Zone. If you can look at this, like I have it right on the screen, NIU is directly south of them is University of Memphis. Like that's a bus trip. That's not a flight. NIU to Memphis or Memphis plays NIU. That's a bus trip. You don't have to charter anything. No, charter a flight. That's a bus trip. Real simple, real easy. Same thing, Toledo to Memphis. That's a bus trip. Memphis to Toledo. That's a bus trip. You're not in a situation where you're having to do too much. travel wise at least, right? But like I said, it shows that the PAC is willing to go east, and it's been speculated for the most part. It's been thrown out there that yeah, if the PAC is gonna expand and add more schools, which they will, right? It seems like they understand how this game works. They're gonna grab from the AAC. Now the AAC, funny enough, the AAC has three Texas schools. I can't envision a world where the AAC isn't at least losing one of those Texas schools. It could either be Rice or UTSA. In this example, I put Rice. I put Rice because Rice is in Houston, which is the bigger media market. Rice gives you the academics, hands down. Rice has very good baseball. Like historically, their baseball team is pretty solid. Now we know on the football end, that's a different story. Rice has some good years. Rice has had some probably a few more bad years, right? But Rice has the potential. Like if Rice wanted to go all in on football, I really think they could. But like I said, when you have an academic centered school, it gets real difficult to convince, the president of the university or the board or whoever to be like, we want to put XYZ dollars into the football team. They're gonna be like, no, most of the time, right? Um, but Rice is down there as an example, right? It could be UTSA, it could be UT San Antonio instead of Rice. It could be San Antonio instead of Rice. Like I said, I went with Rice because of Houston. Even in this example, let's say they don't go after either of those two. You also have North Texas. North Texas gives you a Dallas media market. I want to say where North Texas is located. I want to say that's Denton, Texas. I want to say that they fall under the Dallas Fort Worth media market. So North Texas could potentially be an option. And then even then, we saw the Mountain West contact or reach out to Texas State, which is kind of nestled between San Antonio and Austin. I want to say it's a bit closer to Austin than it is San Antonio. They could reach out to Texas State for all I know, right? When it comes to the state of Texas, there's quite a few options. There's quite a few options, right? They could go after Texas State. They can go after Rice. They can go after UTSA, North Texas. They got options when it comes to Texas. It really comes down to, do they want more than one Texas school, right? Instead of going after more than one Texas school, I was like, you know what? Let's think about the schools, the group of schools that have been performing over these last 10, 15, 20 years. Tulsa's one of them. So instead of just loading up on a bunch of Texas schools, right, let's spread it out a bit. You contact Tulsa. Like I said, maybe you add UTSA or Rice, whichever one, right? But you got Tulsa on there. You got Rice. Tulane. Other than Memphis, Tulane has been speculated as a for sure target that the PAC would go after. Right, so it's Memphis and Tulane. Memphis gives you football and basketball. Tulane gives you more football than basketball, but Tulane has been a hot name in general. Tulane, I thought was going to be ending up in the Big 12, but I think when those four PAC schools left the PAC and ended up in the Big 12, it just kind of there's just no space right now, and that kind of may have hindered the future plans for Tulane to the Big 12, because it's just too many mouths to feed at the moment. So you go after Tulane. Basketball right now, USF, very solid in basketball at the moment. All right, so you go after USF. I know there's also Florida Atlantic, but I want to say that they just joined the AAC, so I don't think they're going to be as super quick to turn around and exit. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Florida Atlantic gets a call instead of USF. I don't know. But USF, potential target, right? Those four AAC schools, particularly really Memphis and Tulane. Memphis and Tulane have seemed like the two for sure. Memphis is the for sure, seeing that they've already been contacted by the PAC. But Memphis and Tulane seem like the top two. After that, USF, potential target. And then, like I said, when it came to the state of Texas, it's really just a toss up. I'm the one who's throwing Tulsa out there. I'm throwing Tulsa out there, right? I think Tulsa also gets contacted. But I don't think the PAC is on a different level the way they're moving. If they just went and snagged 5 schools from the Mountain West, and it was almost 6 because we all know that they wanted UNLV. If you look at the map, Nevada is just sitting in the middle of all this. Nevada is just sitting in the middle, and you have no representation because they could not get UNLV, right? The PAC, I feel like they wanted UNLV, um, but you see that they have no issue going after a handful of schools, right? They absolutely have no issue. The AAC contacted the Mountain West to get Air Force. That'd have been interesting, but they did. So you would have had all 3 of all the military, the service academies, all in the same conference, right? And then maybe the AAC begins more of a a Western push, right? Because if Colorado is the school you have the furthest west, maybe you want to add one more or something to create some sort of bridge, you know. But anyways, I would not be shocked if they go after 4, or no, go after 5, because right now you're sitting at 8, but you really have 7 that are football. So if you want to get to 12, well, we're just doing basic math at this point. Well, you need 5 schools. But this is where NIU and Toledo come into play. If I take NIU and Toledo off that map, it's kind of more like you dipped into the South Central. So you're still mostly Central Time Zone. You're a bit Southern. And then you got USF. That would give you your Eastern Time Zone representative, your only Eastern Time Zone representative, right? But if you add an NIU and a Toledo, you're spreading out that footprint more. NIU, once again, I'll say it a million times, NIU gives you that dip into the Chicago market. That is the 3rd largest media market in the nation. NIU gets you into that. Toledo, you get Eastern Time Zone, a second Eastern Time Zone school, you get into the Toledo market. Now, Toledo, some people don't even probably know or realize Toledo has a media market. It does, right? But so they get that Toledo media market, which can also maybe potentially expand into Cleveland, right? Ohio in general has a lot going on. So, like I said, you get another Eastern Time Zone school, you get to pick up another market, right? Your footprint going out a bit more. And like I said, when you look at these conferences, you want more than 9 schools. You want more than 10, right? You get to 14. I feel like nowadays 14 is the sweet spot. 14 gives you the sweet spot. If you look at how the western half of this conference is spread out, right? It's from north to south, up and down. You got the Pacific time zone, um, and you got the Mountain time zone. The Mountain time zone not as spread out as they may want it to be, but it is what it is, you know. You got Idaho, you got Utah, you got Colorado. Not really much is going on in Montana, right? We know there is Montana football, but from a media market standpoint, from a population standpoint, right? Not much with Montana. We know Wyoming is there. Wyoming may have been a target as well for the PAC, but Wyoming stayed put. We got the state of Arizona. Arizona is really, there's only really Arizona and Arizona State at the FBS level. Like, I don't think I'm missing anybody else. So it would require somebody being brought up from the FCS level for Arizona to come into play. And I don't think that's what the PAC is trying to do. They're not trying to really bring up any FCS programs. New Mexico, maybe New Mexico was in play, maybe they weren't. Not 100% sure. But like I said, you move over to this eastern half, it allows you to not go super far all the way East Coast other than USF. Other than USF. But if you look at the way that this is, USF to Tulane, that's not super bad. USF to Rice, that's not super bad. Even USF to Memphis, not super bad. USF to, like, if you create a Eastern Division and here's your 7 schools, it works. Travel works for those teams. A USF all the way to Washington State, Lord. USF all the way to Oregon State, that's a lot. But if you create your Eastern Division, different story. You have all these schools that overall are contributing to the power and strength of the conference without having to travel around the world. Like those Stanford versus, you know, those Stanford ACC games right now, they just seem so odd and out of place, right? They really do. Even, I'm not even gonna lie, even some of these Big Ten games right now, they just seems kind of crazy. Now, of course, when you get an Oregon versus Ohio State, you get a 2 versus 3. That's what you're looking for. That's exactly what you're looking for when we're talking about viewership, ratings, just the overall experience. You want that, right? You just got a college football playoff matchup during the halfway point of the season, right? So you want those type of matchups. But other than that, I'm like, that travel is crazy. It's insane. That travels a lot. So if you can create some way, somehow, divisions, right? A division where, okay, you have your 7 schools. This is your Eastern Division. You got 7 Western. It works out. It works out really well. If you do divisions, well, okay, NIU will have 6 Eastern games, right? We're playing Toledo, Memphis, Tulsa, Rice, Tulane, and USF every year, right? So that's 6 games. And then you just got to play 2 in the West, whether that be pick a 2, like random, they'll figure out how they do that, but you just got to pick those 2. And one of them may be a home game, or they could both be away, but now it's like that travel isn't as bad. It's not as bad if I'm only worried about 2 games out west versus everything else. I mean, I'm playing 4 other teams that are in the central time zone. I'm playing Toledo, who I've played for over 20 years now. The furthest I may really truly need to travel in my division is USF. And that's it. That's not a bad situation. I also got something, if you noticed, I got them circled up the way I do. That's more for that pod configuration. So let's say they don't want to do divisions. Let's say, no, we're not doing divisions. We're going to spice this up. We're going to have people all over the place playing this school, playing that school. You do your pods. If we look at these pods, the way it would work is you got 3-4-3-4, right? Because you got 14 schools. You got to find a way to make it work. And every 4 years they rotate, or every 4 years, right? That's where you can make changes. Typically, the way pods work, you're putting schools together primarily for rivalry purposes. Rivalry purposes. The monotony of scheduling and things like, right? You're just spicing things up, right? It turns into, when you do pods, and the end of the season, your conference championship game comes down to the 2 best in the conference, instead of, well, here's the best in this division, here's the best in this division. It changes the aspect of things. Truly, when you look at the East, the only, I guess, rivalry you could say is really NIU and Toledo. USF, their rival is UCF, so that's not even in this conference. Tulane, they don't really have any rivals that would be in this conference. Same thing with Rice, same thing with Tulsa, same thing with Memphis. So it's like, yeah, your East is kind of making its own whole new thing, right? Maybe some new rivalries start from being together like this. You would just kind of work with it. Like, at least Memphis, Tulsa, Rice, Tulane, and USF would and should already have some familiarity with each other. So that's a positive there because they would all have been in a conference together already. Uh, and like I said, NIU and Toledo, they've known each other. We're talking about the last 20 plus years. So there's definitely the familiarity. I know NIU, I believe NIU's played USF in a bowl game before, you know. So that's my interaction. I know that they've had. I know NIU's played Tulsa NIU's played Tulsa. I don't know if it was in a bowl game or if it was just a non-con game, but they've played each other. So there's levels of familiarity between some of these schools already. Um, I know if you look at the western half, if you look at these pods, Oregon State, Washington State, that's a rivalry you want to keep together for the most part. And I think no matter how it goes, those two would be like, nah, we need to stay together. We stayed together through this whole conference falling apart. We're going to stay together, when it comes to pod assignments. Boise State and Fresno State, they're rivals. Fresno State and San Diego State are rivals. So you'd want those three together for the most part. Utah State, they're kind of odd man out. Colorado State, they're odd man out. Potentially, you see maybe a rivalry form between Utah State and Colorado State. Maybe you can see something happen with those two. But the way these pods would work, right? Like I said, there's a 3-4-3-4. Maybe this works, maybe it don't. I don't know. I'm not the super math guy, but I was just trying to put something together that could maybe potentially work. Right, like I said, every 4 years these would shift. So every 4 years you would see a shift. You could potentially see, maybe you get Tulsa, right? Let's say 4 years from now, or after 4 years, Tulsa joins the pod with Memphis, NIU, and Toledo, right? That becomes that pod. Um, After 4 years, let's say maybe Utah State or maybe Colorado joins the pod with Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, right? That could potentially happen. Or you could probably move multiple schools around. But, like I said, the goal is with the pods, if there are any rivalries, you want to keep them together, right? If there are any rivalries, you want to keep them together. But for the most part, you'll still end up playing a lot of the schools in the conference regardless, right? So here's the other aspects of the pods. If I'm in a pod of three, so for instance, I'm NIU. The whole point of the pods, you're playing the schools in your pods. So NIU is going to play Memphis every year, and NIU is going to play Toledo every year, right? So that's 2 games. Remember, conference schedule, we're probably going to run a 8-game conference schedule. So I already got 2. If I'm in a pod of 3, I'm going to play 2 more schools from basically each pod. So there could be a year where NIU plays Memphis and Toledo for sure, and then let's say NIU plays Tulsa and Rice. Right? They play Tulsa and Rice. They play Washington State and Utah State, and then they play Fresno State and San Diego State. That's their 8 games. That's their 8 games, right? That's how that would work. But let's say I'm a school like Oregon State. Well, I'm gonna play the 3 that are in my pod. So I'm gonna play Washington State, I'm gonna play Utah State, and I'm gonna play Colorado State. I'm gonna play 2 schools from the pods of 3. So let's say Oregon State plays Boise State and San Diego State. Oregon State plays Memphis and Toledo. So right now they're sitting at 7 games. They would play one school from the other pot of 4. They would play one school from the other pot of 4 once each year. So like I said, in a 4-year span, let's say that first year they play Tulsa, second year they play Rice, third year they play Tulane, and fourth year they play USF. So technically on paper it seems like it works out to me. Like I said, get the algorithm machine running to make sure it's possible and doable. You don't run into any errors in scheduling, but that's how you can make that work. That's how you can make that one work, and I think it works out. I think it works out. But like I said, looking at what's available, looking at your options, looking at what makes sense, essentially the PAC has the chance to kind of put together the best of the group of and kind of just make a conference like that, right? The reason I'm thinking all this is possible is because I truly do deep down think they're going to do their meteor rights eval and they're going to essentially be able to create a situation where they have the money. They have the money to approach these schools and add them. If the PAC comes to Tulsa and they're like, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a 15 school conference, right? 15 schools. Everybody's a full member. You heard me right. Everybody would be a full member because in this scenario, NIU can afford, for the most part, NIU would be able to afford that travel. I would think, I would hope they could afford that travel from NIU to Toledo. Like they could afford the travel. Long story short, right? We should be able to afford that travel. Right? Whether it be football, basketball, right? If we're making significantly more money, we should be able to afford the travel. It should not be the end of the world type of situation. It shouldn't be a death penalty type of situation. NIU would actually be able to join as a full member, and it would work. It would work because they would know, at least when it comes to football, if they do divisions, they now know, oh, we don't have to travel super far west. We're playing four other teams in our time zone. We're playing Toledo that's down the street. And like I said, we're playing USF. Even if they do pods, like I said, you can still end up in a situation where guess what? You know what? We're playing Memphis and Toledo. We can bust there. Tulsa, we could essentially we can bust to as well, right? You know, like it works. It ends up working out. It ends up working out regardless. And the number, like I said, I got a feeling PAC will be able to hit a number that is high enough where they could approach these schools and everybody's getting a payout of like 10 mil. I really do think I think the PAC's going to pull it off. Even if it was 8 mil, even if it's 8 mil, that is more than what the current AAC schools have coming. So it's going to end up pushing them to leave. You don't say no to more money. Especially if we're talking about 10 mil. Let's say they end up pushing that number and it's 15 mil. If you're giving each one of these schools $15 million, there's no way that they're turning down full sports membership. And I think that would be the best bet for NIU. Currently, the Mountain West can't go that route because the Mountain West, it don't seem like they're trying to push super far east to build up a central time zone, eastern time zone presence that NIU travel wise would be able to benefit from. Whereas there is the potential that the PAC could build up a central slash eastern time zone presence that schools like Toledo and NIU would not have as harsh of a time traveling to play, right? It just works out. Like I said, the money and the distance works out. And even if the NIU has to go out west, it works out. We have the money for the travel. We're going to come out there. We're going to compete. You know how we roll. So, like I said, this is just for fun. This is all speculation. But I'm like, yo, I could see a PAC. I could see a Pacific Athletic Conference that you have this. And it works really well. I could see it. I know people are like, it's the Pacific Athletic Conference. Nowadays, none of that matters. None of that matters. Like I said, you got the Big Ten, and the Big Ten got more than 10 schools, and the Big Ten been expanded to the East Coast. Well, now they've expanded to the West Coast. You have the ACC, you have literally the ACC, who has the Athletic Coast Conference. They got two teams all the way from the West Coast, Stanford and Cal, and then you got SMU coming from that Dallas Fort Worth area all the way over to the east. Like, so people got to realize none of that matters anymore. You can name the conference whatever you want to name it. Like I said, are you giving us some good sports, some opportunity, some good viewership, right? That's all that matters. The money is what matters the most when it comes down to a lot of this realignment and expansion. That's what people are looking at, and that's what they're looking for. Either you got to be in a strong media market, good football, or good brand.